passionate about helping business leaders build confidence, gain clarity, and create community. And I've had a ton of friends on this podcast, David Pollock, Coach Hugh Jackson, some really amazing athletes and players, Peerless Price, John Smoltz, some good friends, but I'm going to fanboy out on you guys today because I am a Michigan fan. And I've got the one and only Jake Butt. For all you Michigan fans, gosh, probably the greatest tight end that's ever played at the University of Michigan. This kid is absolutely tore up at Michigan, tore up in the NFL until injuries kind of derailed him, almost like it did Pollock.
I did tear it up. It's just not in the way that you would think so, you know.
Kind of like Davey. We were talking off air just a little bit about David Pollock, who's a super good friend of mine. I texted him a couple of days ago, and and Davey's at his point, broke his neck when he was with Cincinnati, and I remember I was going to say this. I'll say this on air. I'll send this to Davey. The first Thursday night football game he did on ESPN, I think it may have been a high school game. Mm-hmm. He gets on air and his tie is like halfway down his shirt. Looks like Keystone Cop. I'm texting my bro, somebody's got to fix your tie. And they go into commercial break, come back, and one of the guys that actually fixed Davey's tie. But yeah, dude, tell our audience a little bit, for those of us that aren't Michigan fans, tell our audience, Jake, a little bit about who you are and what you've got going on, man.
Well, as far as with David Pollock, you're a good friend because I remember the first game, it is so fast paced. It's live TV. Like the last thing you're thinking about a lot of things, not about your tie position. So a good friend should reach out and help you out. Who I am. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. You mentioned I went to Michigan, grew up a Buckeye fan, thought I was going to go to Ohio State and they didn't offer me. So I went to Michigan. And I think that's kind of been the theme of my life, my story where, I've been met with a challenge. I've been forced to have to adapt. And then from that, I've learned to grow. And from that, then when I face challenges now, I instead of looking at them like, wow, life's out to get me, what's going on? This isn't fair. I just understand that the challenge forces adaptation, which then leads to growth. So I go to Michigan, had a really good career, 2-time All-American, career record holder in receptions and yards. Won the national tight end of the year, a 2-time conference tight end of the year. So all that should have told you I was going to be a, first or second round draft pick after the 2016 season, except for one little thing. You mentioned I tore it up. I tore up my ACL in that bowl game in the last game of my career. That was the second time in the same knee. And I went from a projected probably high second round pick, slipping all the way to the 5th round. Sit out my rookie year in Denver. It's all good. They believed in me. We'll put it behind you. I'd never been injured in my life. Come back from that, bang, tore it again. Recovered from that, bang, retore both my meniscus. So I ended up retiring from the NFL after about 4 years. And again, met with this challenge where I felt I could do something, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And now it, through some, lucky bounces, really, I'm working in a career field that I really enjoy, that doesn't feel like work, that I love to do. I get to still be around the game, really football and media coverage as an analyst for the Big Ten Network. I call games, I cover the conference and the national landscape of college football throughout the week for a number of different networks. And in my spare time, I hang out with guys like you, Ken, and we get to talk a little bit about this, talk about leadership, talk about life. Because of everything I just said, there was a period where I was all about ball, but because of the challenges, it's opened my eyes and changed my perspective on a number of things.
Well, let's go back and talk about the mindset deal, because there's so many things in your story I didn't even know. I mean, obviously I'm a huge Michigan fan. I go every year. I took my 14-year-old to the Big Ten championship this year. First time she flew on a plane. First time she went to a Michigan game. Now I have no Michigan sweatshirts in my closet. They're all at her house with her mom. Like, she takes everything I have.
That's good though. That's good. Yes, where her head's at, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is. But let's talk. So I didn't know. I knew you were from Columbus, but I didn't know you grew up an Ohio State fan.
Yeah.
So really kind of the first kind of setback you did growing up as an Ohio State fan, wanting to go play in your hometown, and they don't offer you.
Yeah.
Walk me through that. How did you?
Getting offers from everybody, was getting looked at from everybody. I went to Ohio State's camp twice, dominated it. Like, the director of recruiting, his name was Greg Gillum. He oversees all the football operations and recruiting. I went to middle school all the way through high school with his son, Tanner Gillum. And funny enough, during career day, Greg Gillum, the director of football operations, came and spoke to us. I'll send you this. It's an unbelievable story. He spoke to us in 5th grade at the end of the day about hey, here's what it's like to be an Ohio State football player. Here's what you need to do. Here's why it's so cool. And I wrote a letter to him in 5th grade back in 2007. I said, hey, thanks for coming to speak with us. I now know what I want to do. I want to be a football player. Ended up getting drafted. They didn't offer me, but Greg Gillum came and knocked on my door the day after I got drafted, had that letter framed and handed it back to me. So it was really cool. But again, I mean, Ken, I used to knock on people's doors and mow lawns in high school to make some extra money. I'm mowing Tim Hinton's lawn, who was the tight end coach for Ohio State. So like there was nothing more I could have done to get that recognition and the offer. But, you know, life doesn't care. They offered a guy named Marcus Ball out of California. And for me, I knew I wanted to play in the game. Marcus Ball. Yeah, right. He's I think he's playing in the USFL now, but yeah, no, man. So, you know, I knew I wanted to play in the game, and I went to Michigan, and you know, this is kind of the
how big of a deal was that for you?
A big deal.
Because that's like there's not very many teams I hate, but Ohio's one of them. I don't even capitalize them. I just write a little O. But tell me what that looked like for you.
My best friend going back to kindergarten was a guy by the name of Alex Butler. He was a Michigan fan. We used to get in fist fights because I was defending Ohio State and he was defending Michigan, right? I was passionate about that. Funny enough, my grandfather played at Notre Dame for Frank Leahy. So my 2 teams growing up were Ohio State and Notre Dame. Neither offered me. The last place I thought I was going to go was Michigan. So I got a big family. My mom's one of 16. My dad's one of 8. 99% of them are Michigan fans now. There's a couple that hang on. So it was a big deal. And, you know, I college lifting and conditioning is challenging. I had free juice, free fuel. Anytime I got tired, like you know, Tom Brady uses it, felt disrespected 6th-round draft pick. That's a beautiful thing to have that thing to go back on and give yourself extra energy. I would always come back to that. And I always had something to prove because I felt rejected by, you know, the fan base in the school that I grew up 15 minutes from campus.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you've seen The Last Dance. I grew up in Pontiac, 6 blocks from the Silverdome. You know, Pistons were my team. I hated Jordan. I absolutely couldn't stand him back in the day. Now he's the greatest player by far. It's not even close. I know they talk about LeBron. He just got swept by the damn Nuggets, man. Shut up. But anyway, I digress. But I remember Jordan in that Last Dance talking about the series with the Suns, about Dan Marley. You know, he walked by Dan Marley at the end of one of the games. It's a game the Suns, I think it was game 1 or game 2, the Suns won. And he turned around, the video shows him turn around, and you can't really even see Marley say anything to him. And the reporter asked him at the end of the game, what did he say to you? And he said something to him that was kind of crude, or you're, and it just fired him up. And then I remember when they asked Jordan in the Last Dance, what did Marley say to you? He goes, he didn't say anything to me. I just used it as leverage. You actually had some leverage.
Yeah.
You go into Ann Arbor. What was your first trip to Columbus like? Like you're going back home. This is the team that said, you're not good enough for us.
Well, you know, the first one was in 2013. It was my freshman year. It was Luke Fickell. It was when I was being recruited, it was when it went from Tressel to Fickell and then eventually Urban Meyer. So 2013 was my freshman year. I graduated high school early, so I was very skinny. That's what I think it was, is I didn't look like a tight end. I wasn't naturally gifted and big at that point. So I put on about 40 pounds, and that allowed me, by week 3 of my freshman year, I ended up starting, and I got a little bit better each week until it came down to that Ohio State game. It was in the Big House. If you remember it, was 42-41. We lost on a failed 2-point attempt, but I was locked in, man, and I had an unbelievable game. I think I had like 5 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. My touchdown tied it up like 35-35 in the fourth quarter. So it was at least individually proved to them that, hey man, you guys missed on me. And like, I know that I'm the player that you know, you didn't see it, but I've kind of proved myself right, that I can play in this game at the college level. So I always had that game obviously circled on my calendar. So that was my freshman year. I ended my career in another tragic game against Ohio State, number 2 versus number 3. That one was in Columbus, double overtime. And unfortunately, you know, I don't have any team victories, which is all that really matters here. They did get the best of me. Yeah. I can take it. You guys can make fun of me. I can take it. It's all good. But certainly always had that game circled on the calendar.
Walk me through. So you tear your ACL early in your career at Michigan, rehab, and then you tore it again in the bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Walk
Yeah.
me through, because, one of the things that especially I'm in my 50s. I graduated high school in 86, probably before you were born. You just didn't see a lot of guys skip out on bowl games like you do now. And you
Yeah.
didn't do that.
Yeah.
You were like, no, I'm staying.
Yeah.
Walk me through that. Was it even a decision of yours not to play in the bowl game?
Well, the year before I got injured was when Jalen Smith, the linebacker for Notre Dame, got injured. And of course, it was a public thing. And with social media, like the velocity of information, right? We were counting the millions of dollars that he was losing as he was falling in the draft. So that's when the topic started to heat up a little bit. And we were playing on New Year's Eve. Couple bowl games were before that, and Leonard Fournette sat out of his bowl game. I know that was a big headline.
Mm-hmm.
Christian McCaffrey sat out of his bowl game. I know that was another headline. So again, this is starting to get velocity. And I had previously tore my right ACL my sophomore year, and then a year later I had to clean up all my meniscus. So I had two knee surgeries at this point in my career. And I remember guys in the locker room coming up to me and asking, like, "Hey, like, are you going to play in this game?" And I couldn't believe that they were asking that.
Yeah.
Of course I was going to play in the game. And, a big piece of that is I don't take that game for granted, but, I was elected captain my senior year. So those guys counted on me, right? A leader would never sit out of the game. And frankly, as we just touched on, I hadn't won a big game, really, something that was like a huge game with implications at Michigan. We were 0-4 against Ohio State, and Florida State was a great team. It was a New Year's Six bowl. I wanted to go out there and say, all right, we just lost to Ohio State in a tragic game. Let's go beat Florida State. Let me have a good game. And let's put that on the belt to say we went out with a bang. So that was all my mentality until, I tore my ACL, and it's one of those things.
Jake, walk me through what's going on in your mind. You knew it. You had to have known it when you did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Walk me through what's going on in your mind in that moment.
So I can even go back to the first one where I had never been injured in my life. I never missed any time, even going back to my childhood. And when I tore it, it's a loud pop. Like it is a audible pop, and your knee, you can just feel it, right? And your whole leg goes numb. So even though I hadn't torn my ACL before, I was laying there on the ground and I was like, man, I just tore my ACL. The bowl game was the same thing. And I got smoked, man. I spun off a guy, and as soon as I planted, bang, safety Trey Marshall smacked me right in my knee, and it bent on a 90-degree angle. Same thing. I could hear the pop, and then my leg goes numb, and I knew it right away. The trainers do this test called a Lockman test. If your femur and your shin bone are wobbling a lot, you got no ACL. So as I laid there, I was like, gosh, man, I just really did this. And I was honestly in disbelief that I was going to have to go through this with, 3 more hours, and I'm going on to realize my dream of the NFL. So I'll tell you this, I get back to the locker room and I'm in tears. I'm crying. I'm processing everything. Like, wow, like that's how I end my career. Wow. Obviously money. I was like, man, that's probably cost me $3, $4, $5 million, like all that's going. My mom comes down, my fiance, my dad, my brothers, and it's just an intense situation. And that woke me up a little bit, because after I gave myself 5 minutes, panic, mind is all over the place. Eventually I realized I had to step up, and I was like, hey, listen, we're going to get through this. Let's start to focus on the things we can control. I had my dad call the insurance company. I'm like, let's make sure we're covered here. So I got some loss. We were good on that. Clean. That gave me some peace. But then I said, all right, we know we need surgery. Where can we have surgery? We can do it in Michigan. We can do it in Alabama. We can do it in San Diego. What would those rehabs look like? Do I stay in rehab where I have surgery? What does the timeline look like? Can I play next year? So I started to put some structure together.
Where did that come from, Jake? Because most people would have been like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like tell me where that came from. Where did
my
that
dad,
inner resolve come from?
My dad, and you build inner resolve by being challenged growing up. My last name is Butt, so I got terrorized. Like I wasn't always a good athlete. In fact, I was a poor athlete in basketball and wasn't great in football. So my dad would always boil it down to, it was always super competitive. So I knew I had that fire. he just helped me. It's the simplest but truest message. Focus on what you can control. And that's you in order to realize that as truth, you have to be challenged and you have to practice that, and then you'll see the value in it. So that started, my whole childhood. And in that moment, the question was, what can I control? My ACL's torn, can't control it. Here's what I can control. Let's get the plan going forward. And I knew I'd be able to overcome it.
I love that. And so tear your ACL, get drafted. Walk me through that. Walk me through kind of that process. I mean, it was just, your whole high school journey and college journey has been overcoming obstacles and just getting punched in the mouth and having to get back up and keep going. Walk me through draft day.
Unbelievably frustrating. I knew it's a 3-day process. So I knew I wasn't going to go in the first round, but there was maybe I could go in the third round. Maybe I was still going to go. So I had family in town. I had friends in town. We're all sitting around the TV, and it was embarrassing, to sit there, and it's a 3-hour show, and my, tight end after tight end, guys that I felt strongly, I'd proven my film was better than. And, the second round comes and goes, the third round comes and goes. And I didn't even say goodbye to anyone. I just went straight up to bed that night and was just pissed off at the whole situation. Get a call from my agent. He's like, "Hey man, fourth round, you're the number one player on the board." I think Mel Kiper had me the number one available player. They're like, "You're going to go in the fourth round." Fourth round comes and goes. More tight ends get off the board.
What was that like, sitting with your family and watching?
Frustrating. I mean, I had to stand up and walk away. You can feel the energy, man. It's not a clean energy. A lot of people were stressed. A lot of people were sad. A lot of people were, not in a good place. And I could feel that. I certainly was. And I was pissed off. But that being said, I finally get the call from a Denver area code. I talked to John Elway. They know I'm coming to Denver. They assured me, "Hey, we believe in you. You're going to overcome this. We're not going to rush you, and you're going to come back and be the guy that we know you're capable of." So that was when I was able to pivot and start focusing again. All right, I know where I'm going to go. Let's attack this thing. At that point, I was about 5 months out of surgery. So I was getting ready to run. I just started jogging. So I was at a good point in my rehab and on pace to make a full recovery.
How much of that moment, sitting there watching the first round, second round, third round, all that stuff go by, did that remind you of getting passed over by Ohio State?
I didn't. I hadn't really considered that, it is very similar though. It is very similar where I like to think of the fork in the road, right? When an event happens to you, then you can choose how to react. I could be pissed off about Ohio State and I could, sulk and feel sorry for myself and have an average career because it's oh, they should offer me. I could be pissed off that I tore my ACL and I, slipped in the draft, sulk and never make a full recovery because all I'm focusing on is what I thought should have happened. But in both those instances, it was a pivot to say, I know who I am. Let me go prove it to myself and prove it to everybody else. I think that's always the better route.
Yeah. I love that. Talk to me about really the pivotal time for you was when you tear your ACL in the bowl game until John Elway gave you the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
What kept you going? Because you're hearing all the stuff. I remember just being a fan.
Yeah.
Hearing all this stuff about how much money you're losing and you're not going to get drafted and all this stuff. What kept you going during those 5 months?
Yeah.
Was it I want to prove myself. I know this is in me, because you don't have a John Elway phone call, is coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kept you going after that ACL tear?
Well, let's talk about this one because then there was more ACL tears, and that's where you can really get in deep. At that point, I was just listen, I was making great strides in my recovery. I knew I wasn't done playing. I knew I had at least 1 year to recover, and then let me just see how I feel next year. And I knew I was capable of playing in the NFL. So there was really no thoughts other than it's just hey, let me just go through this rehab. I'm with the best doctors in the world. I'm with the best trainers, and I'm at the best rehab facilities. Let me just show up each day and do what I needed to do, same as I did for my first ACL. And I know I can come back from this. So that was the easy part of it. And I was put on IR to start the season, or NFI, non-football injury, because it happened outside of the NFL. So I got cleared to practice week 7. I come in week 7, unbelievable practice, man. Unbelievable practice. And I got coaches coming up to me, and I was all right, man, I know I'm routing up the starters on the defense. So I was man, I can play in this league. And, we had a team dinner that night after practice. The OC, Mike McCoy, comes up to me and he's like, "Hey man, get ready. Maybe not this week. We'll gear you up, but we're going to use you. You look great, dude. I went to sleep that night. I woke up the next day and I couldn't walk. I had like a bone bruise, and that was the adverse time where I knew, hey, I'm shut down for the season. Like, and I did question, man, is this going to be a lingering thing? Like, am I going to be able to overcome that? But I still had, I had 3 more months. I went back on IR. I had no need to practice. So I was still able to rehab, get cleared from that, go into the off season, and then I'm fully healthy. And going into that off season after that second ACL, missing my rookie year, going into my second year, that was the best I'd ever felt in my career. I felt amazing. I had the best spring ball of that career. I was going up and running great routes, one-handed catches. And, I use this as an example. The offensive coordinator, they have their play sheet. You see them on the sideline with their play sheet. On the front is all the plays in the playbook, the plays. On the back is players. So here's our plays. Here's our players. And each person, like Demaryius Thomas, he had a rack of 10, 12 plays. Here's how we're going to get DT the ball. Emmanuel Sanders, 10 plays. Here's how we're going to get E-Man the ball. I was there. It was us three. They had a rack of plays for me because I had proved to them, like, hey, I can play in this league. So it was confirmed at that point. Had no issues with my knee. Felt great. I was putting this behind me, and I was on my way to the NFL career.
Yeah, I love that. And so NFL career starts off great. You're going well, and you get hurt again.
Going in, week 1, week 2, week 3, I had a good start to the season, and it was a small sample size, 3 games, but I knew it. I was on pace. If I had maintained that production, I would have broken the rookie records for reception and yards in Denver, right? Week 3, we played the Ravens. I had like 1 catch for 5 yards on 1 target. Like, they just didn't get me involved at all in the game plan. Week 4 was the Broncos versus Kansas City on Monday Night Football. Rivalry game, divisional game. We were 3-1 at that point, I believe. And because I came off a game without any targets, they were going to feed me, man. They had so many plays up for me that week, running a fade in the end zone, running double moves. I really believed, I was like, man, I'm going to play on the road at Arrowhead, and I'm going to outplay Travis Kelce on Monday Night Football, and I'm going to put myself on the map. And like, then the story starts changing. It becomes an unbelievable story of perseverance. It's Thursday practice. We just finished warming up. I'm running down on scout team kickoff. I can't tackle anybody, man. I was never going to be, part of the kickoff coverage team. I go to plant to just give a guy a look, and the ground gave way just a little bit, and bang, tore my ACL again. I had rehab to that point. It was like a 1.5 year rehab, and I had been healthy for maybe 4 months when this happened. And that was the one that pulled me deep, man. Like, I normally kept my composure, as I've shared with you. I went back to the locker room there. I slammed my helmet down. I was screaming. They took me to get an MRI. I didn't talk to people for like 3 days, man. I cried for like 3 days. I was just so unbelievably frustrated. Part of it too is, third strike and you're out. Very few people overcome three ACLs. I think Thomas Davis is the only one. So the mental challenges that came from that recovery were deep and vast.
So what helped you get out of that hole? You said you didn't talk to anybody for 3 days.
I had great people, man. The tight ends, the guys that I played with, they came over and brought me over a cheesecake and just spent time with me for a little while. I had a group of friends. We had a Bible study at the time, and, I called them. We had a 2-hour phone call. I didn't say a word. Like, we just sat there on the phone, and I cried, and they listened, and each person prayed for me. My parents, my family, my fiance, just having people just pushing me in the right direction, and having trainers too, like letting me just put one foot in front of the other at some point. I didn't have to get cleared from this. I just had to learn how to walk again. Hey, I had to learn how to get a quad firing again, like just boiling it down to the simplest steps. That period in my life, I started to do some serious soul searching. I started reading books. I got into journaling. I got into meditation and visualization because of how much I was suffering. I was forced, same thing. I met a challenge. I had to adapt. That adaptation allowed me to grow. So because of that dark time, I was able to learn tools that I still use to this day.
Yeah, I love that. I told you earlier off air that David Pollock and I have been friends for, probably 15 years now. Super good friends. And, and Davey says all the time, he wouldn't trade that broken net in spring or preseason for where he's at right now for nothing in the world. But at the time, it felt like the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But just to see what God is, Davey's a person of faith as well. I pastored for 15 years out of the last 30. And that's where Davey and I met when I was pastoring church. But just kind of that faith component of when you get out on the other side, you're like, oh, okay, there's this is waiting for me.
Yeah.
So walk me through the process. Tear your ACL. When did you know, okay, my football career is done?
So that I was struggling with. I'm like, man, can I really, this recovery was the hardest recovery I had. I wasn't making significant progress the way as the other one. But I knew 9 months I was going to get cleared. I was on schedule. 9 months and 1 day was the first day of camp. So I get cleared on schedule. I run the conditioning test, all good. Next day, we report for camp, do our physical. The following day is practice 1. Having a great practice again, man, routing people up, looking good. That night, I go to sleep. The next morning, I wake up, I couldn't walk again. I retore both my meniscus, man. That camp was a 4-week-long camp. For those 4 weeks, I was unable to walk for 3 weeks. Then something happened in that fourth week. It was our last preseason game. We're playing the Rams. All of a sudden, it's all clicking. I'm healthy. I'm playing good. I literally graded out 100% in the Rams preseason game. Perfect in pass pro, perfect in run blocking. I caught like 3 passes. I was routing guys up, catching everything. I'm like, thank God, man. Like, thank God this is behind me. We fly home that night. We're on the plane. We land at 4 a.m. I stand up to get off the plane and I can't walk. And, at that point I was literally just like, I hope to God they cut me. Like, just put me out of my misery. They didn't. They kept me on IR for that year. They drafted some guys. They brought some guys in free agency. I went from, the starting tight end to like 7th on the roster. So I was just like, I kind of went into that camp like, man, I got nothing to lose. If I make it, great. If not, fine, cool. I'm good anyways. Dude, I was the only tight end that year to not miss a practice. Not only did I make the team, I was our 2nd string tight end behind Noah Fant against all odds. But week 1, I dislocate both my knuckles, which makes it impossible to catch and block. A couple weeks later, I pull my hamstring. I'm down for the year. That offseason, I get signed with the Bears. I was injured of the 7-month offseason, 6 months of it. I get up to camp and I just knew I wasn't physically ready for a football season. And I knew, my mind wasn't in the right place, man. So I'm staring down the barrel at camp and I pulled my coach aside and I'm like, listen, man, I appreciate this opportunity, but I can't say I'm going to be here when I'm not here. Like I'm going to retire. And, they gave me some time to think about it. I told them, no, like this is my decision. I had retired earlier in the off season for like 2 weeks and just not told anybody. So my heart was kind of out of it at that point. And I ended up retiring, man. And that was the end of the career.
So you walk through that. I mean, obviously up, down, highs, lows, all kinds of things. Talk to me about where you're at now and what was how did you you're like, hey, I still want to be in the game. How can I be an active part of the game and not worry? You don't tear your ACL, stand on the sidelines, interviewing somebody or up in the booth, calling play-by-play. Last time I checked, walk us through how that happened. Like what happened to open that door for you?
So when I retired, I was dealing with all these mental demons and internal battles. And that was such a priority. I was like, I can't play football this year with what I'm experiencing. So I thought I was going to retire and feel better. Wasn't the case. And that actually made me feel worse because I realized that whatever I was fighting was deep in my heart and deep internal. So that first fall, like I had opportunities, Michigan connection. Hey, have you ever thought about doing this career path? And I just was being passive. I had some money saved up and I kind of showed up and did a Michigan podcast, game preview, game review. Went through the whole fall still fighting. And at the end of the fall, I kind of just did like a self audit. And I was like, man, for all the days I had that were really challenging, the best part of my week was when I was talking about football. So I had an opportunity to call the Michigan spring game for Big Ten Network. I did it. It went really well. They offered me a job, signed me on a 1-year deal. I was able to call games last year, do studio, and pretty much I went from that game to now my career is really accelerated. I'm not even a full year into it at this point, but the growth has been phenomenal. The mental growth has been phenomenal. You know, I'm in such a better mental place. And, you know, this, again, the perspective I've learned from those challenges has been extremely valuable, and something that, you know, I'll use some of those things I learned and use that perspective in everything throughout the rest of my life.
Yeah. What would you say out of everything you've been through has been, you know, probably the biggest lesson or the biggest thing you've learned about you as a human being and as a man?
I would say there's been this is the number one thing, because it kind of encompasses everything else. I can look at these instances and say, when I was in those low points, it felt impossible that I was going to get out of my bed and do something, let alone get out of my bed and start a career path, and let alone then accelerate the career path. So the realization that so many of the limits I put on myself, and this is true for humans, are self-imposed. What I once thought was impossible, I've then exceeded it. And then I've done it again. And then I've done it again. So, you know, the conversations I have with my friends and my fiance now, like they're limitless, abundant conversations. I dare to dream big. I dare to pursue the highest goal, because I know, even if it sounds crazy when I say it, there's been 100 instances in my life that have sounded absolutely insane to me, but I've exceeded those statements. And, you know, that's such a valuable thing to be able to sit here at 27 years old and dream absolutely big and try to build this ideal life, you know, for my fiance, and align with my career, my emotional stability, spiritual stability, and so on.
What's the best book you've read in this journey in the last couple, 2 or 3 years?
Okay. So there's a couple. You know, The Alchemist, I thought I don't know if you've read The Alchemist. I really enjoyed that book, to, you know, a little lesson of just everything is almost like an event in a game, and you're kind of moving through life adventurous. You know, it's to take myself extremely seriously all the time, and, you know, looking at this and having opportunities. That was a great one. But one that I come back to all the time, and it was given to our entire team by our strength coach, Lauren Landau. It's called Chop Wood, Carry Water. When I had tore my third ACL, again, I couldn't possibly think about recovering. I just needed to focus on doing the here and the now. It's such a quick read. I give it to anybody that is facing a challenge. You could literally read it in a day. The message is simple and it's clear. Chop wood, carry water effectively means you have to do, you know, in order to achieve great things, in order to get where you want to go, it's not done with one big swoop. You have to just chop wood, carry water today, and it's boring. And maybe you don't want to do it. You know, maybe you want to go do something more exciting. No, just chop wood, carry water. Do the simplest thing over time. And that's where the progress and the growth is made.
Yeah, I love that. My concept I created about 3 years ago when I started my health journey, I'm down about 80 pounds, was incremental, not monumental. Small daily disciplined decisions over time always equal monumental results. Success cannot escape you when you do the right things every single day. The problem is a lot of people want it quick and they want it now. And the reality of it is we always tend to overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what we can do in the long term.
100%.
So, yes. Jake, man, what's the best place for people to find you and get in contact with you, bro?
Yeah. You can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter. If you just search my name, Jake Butt, my handles are J Booty. You know, that's been my nickname. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. I am active on social media. I'm also on TikTok. You know, if you just search my name on any of those, find me, message me. I do respond to messages. I do like to have conversations. So I just wanted to open that up for anybody.
Yeah, I love it, man. Listen, dude, you've got, man, even a bigger fan than I was before.
Thanks,
even a bigger fan, man. Excited about your future, dude. Love your passion, love your heart, and dude, just your ability to persevere and overcome and continue to take on the challenges that life sends, because life's tough. It can be tough sometimes. And I love how you went back into, you know, I said, how did you overcome that? And you said the relationships.
Yeah.
I got on a call. They listened to me cry for 2 hours. I didn't say a word.
Mm-hmm.
And they just encouraged me. And man, those relationships are always, always, always key.
That's the treasure of life right there. Right. That's the treasure.
1,000%. How old are you now?
27.
Yeah, dude, you're young. You're young. You're half my age. I'm 54.
Okay.
You got a lot less gray than I do. But but to be honest with you though, Jake, at 24 or 27 years old, for you to understand that really is the richness in life. It really is your relationships. My quote that I have in my planner is get in rooms with people who think bigger than you. Mm-hmm. And the relationships are always the number one key to growth in any area of your life, is getting in rooms and surrounding yourself with amazing human beings. And when you do that, it literally, it blows the lid off your mindset of what's possible for you.
I want to add something subtle to that, because I think, there's a fear for people to do that. And there's a fear because imposter syndrome. I deal with it. I'm sure you've dealt with it. Whenever you're starting something new, that's kind of the barrier to entry. You have to be willing to pay the price of questioning why you're doing this or what you're doing it for. Just show up, keep showing up. Ask yourself, not what can you take from it? How can I provide value? And again, same thing. You just do that a little bit at a time. You will reap the rewards of it. And those rewards will be greater than you could ever thought of possible.
Yeah. Well, I love it, dude. I'm proud of you, man. It's great to connect. Great to meet you. Excited to cheer you on, man, and just watch your journey grow. Guys, thank you for joining us on this episode of As a Leader Grows. Again, if this podcast has added value to you, Jake just said it, man, click that subscribe button, snap a screenshot, share it on Instagram. Jake and I will give you a little love on our audiences, and we'll see you next time on As a Leader Grows.